I try to buy really cute shirts for my videos, but you can never see them. Oh well. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This one being very highly requested. We're going to be talking about what is shadow work. This was originally a Patreon question and I answered it over there, so if you ever have questions that you want to ask me and you want the answers sooner, jump on over to Patreon because I have a lot of extra content there. Again, there's a space to ask me questions, but I've also been asked this so many times in my comments as well, and it's really hard to type an answer to this, that I just wanted to do a video. That way I can just send it to people. So in this video, we're going to talk about what it is, do you need to do it, and how do you do it. So welcome if you are new here. My name is Lauren. I'm a psychic development coach. I like to teach people how to be psychic and coach you through how to strengthen your abilities. And part of that is doing shadow work. So we will talk also about how this relates to your psychic ability in this video. But first, let's just get into what the heck is it. So the definition of shadow work actually comes from Carl Jung. And he was an old therapist, psychologist, lots of famous work that he ended up having. One cool side note, I have, he came up with the archetypes that you see in stories like the hero's journey and stuff like that. And I do have one deck based around those archetypes because I've always liked Carl Jung and some of his philosophies. But they're these ones, and it's one of my favorite decks because it has all those different archetypes in it. Anyways, now I'm gonna read this from what I printed off because I cannot memorize this. So, according to Jung, a personality includes the persona, which is the personality that people show to the public, and the shadow self, which remains private or hidden. Unlike the persona, the shadow self often includes traits that a person does not like to show. However, Jung did not view the shadow as a negative or shameful part of a person's personality. To him, it was an important part of their psyche. The goal of shadow work is to assimilate the shadow and the persona so that a person can learn how to manage impulses they usually ignore. So that is kind of book definition. That is where the shadow comes from. It's kind of this idea that you have two parts of you and there's an ideal integration of both where you recognize and acknowledge both, and neither is better than the other. Now I did want to share one more intense interpretation of it that I found. And this one says, the shadow is the dark side of our personality because it consists chiefly of primitive negative human emotions and impulses like rage, envy, greed, selfishness, desire, and the striving for power. So stage one, we need to know our shadow, bring it to our awareness. And then stage two is that we have to integrate our shadow, make it a part of us. The goal of shadow work is to harmonize the opposites and move towards wholeness. So with both of these interpretations and everything that I found online, there's kind of just this idea that you are acknowledging and becoming aware of maybe the more negative stuff that you keep under the surface. And the point is not to ignore it, but to integrate, assimilate, work with it. And truly, this term shadow work is such a popular buzzy word now. And it was not around, I swear, 3-4 years ago. I've been doing psychic work since 2013, 2014, and it has just recently become popular. So I'm going to talk about what I really think this is and just kind of explain it more in layman's terms. To me, shadow work is taking care of your spiritual, mental, emotional, physical health. It's kind of all of the above. It's about recognizing your triggers and trying to work with them instead of against them. It's about understanding and healing past traumas that you've had. It's self-reflection. It's diving into your subconscious. It's looking at your emotions and not hiding from them. It's looking at, again, those more negative emotions, anxiety, depression. Again, it's looking at those more negative emotions like anxiety, depression, and trying to figure out why they're there, what they're trying to tell you. or even like characteristics of your personality that you don't quite like, oh, I'm a really jealous person. Why is that there? Why am I doing this? It's the things we hide from and the things that kind of block us from living our most happy, awesome life day to day. And again, the importance here is not to get rid of it. You cannot get rid of all of these negative things. It's just to lessen it, to manage it, to work with it better, to understand it, and again, assimilate with it, integrate both. Now, truly, I think before the term shadow work came around, you would just call this like psychoanalysis, psychology. You'd call it self-reflection. You would call it introspection. Being just very like aware of yourself and your emotional mental state. I would also call it like self-care, to be honest. I think the great thing about like the term shadow work is that we can communicate the idea to each other like really quickly and we know what we're talking about, but it also has kind of like blown up into this thing that can be really confusing if you're first getting into it and you're just like, what the heck is this? What do I do? But hopefully you kind of understand at the basics. This to me is like being self-reflective, taking care of our emotional health, our mental health. Again, that doesn't exclude like physical stuff because that can like impact the rest of your health. But to me, it's like, it's noticing what's going on underneath the surface in your life. And instead of ignoring it, it's looking at it, it's facing it, it's seeing what you can do, if anything, to lessen it, to make it better, to make life a little bit easier, instead of just like operating on autopilot, if that makes sense. To me, like the opposite of doing like shadow work is like when you hit a wall and you just keep running into it and you don't stop to think, hey, could I be doing something differently? Now, what does this have to do with the psychic ability? If you've taken my courses, you know how much I press on the importance of being a healthy psychic. And really what I mean by that is just taking care of your emotional, spiritual, mental, physical health. Because we know as psychics, if we want to be able to receive psychic information, we have to be a clean and clear vessel. We are allowing psychic information to come in and come out. But there are blocks that we can experience. We can not have that information come through for many, many reasons. And the biggest key to removing those blocks is to taking care of your health in that way. Again, that including mental, emotional, all that good stuff. And so to get more information, to get more accurate information to come through, we really have to make sure we are as healthy and as clean and clear as possible. So doing shadow work is just like a part of being a psychic that you just have to accept and do all the time. Some people ask me like, how can I get to a point where I don't have to do it anymore? It's like, I'm sorry, it's always gonna happen. Life happens, stress happens, things happen to block your intuition daily. There's no like, I will get rid of all psychic blocks forever and ever and ever. It's just a constant thing that you have to work with. Now, it gets better over time and it's not as like hard of work, and there will be times where it feels like you don't have to do anything. But I just want to set like a realistic expectation. It's not something that just you get rid of it and then it never happens again. No. So like really quick, some examples of these, like a mental block that you could be having around your psychic ability. You could have like this idea, this self-limiting belief in your head that you are not psychic and that you don't deserve to be psychic. Emotionally, you could have just gone through like a really big fight with your parents or something, and your emotions are really heightened and really stressed out. And so that can block your psychic ability from receiving information because your emotions are so high. Physical blocks, for example, you could be pregnant and you could really be hurting and you have a lot of back pain, which can be a distraction, and that distraction can kind of hinder your ability to fully receive as much information as you would like to receive. If your life is so stressful from work and like dealing with your boss, or maybe you've just been living in survival mode because you are so cutting it close from paycheck to paycheck that that's all you can think about, and you're constantly living in just like an anxious flight or fight state. or you have like a chronic illness that you have to deal with day to day that you can't do anything about. Like that is just as huge of like an issue that people have to go through and deal with. Maybe it was something so small, like somebody just said like gave you a YouTube comment that just like triggered you in such a tiny way, you know, and you have to like think about why is that bothering me so much, you know? Spiritual blocks could even just look like, I don't know why I'm doing life, what I'm doing, and where I'm headed, and I just don't have a purpose. And because of that, I'm just feeling blocked with my psychic ability. So there's so much that could be going on. Those are just like really quick examples. But ultimately, you have to understand here that to use your psychic ability, you're trying to get rid of these blocks as much as possible. And it's just so much easier to use your psychic ability when you don't have these blocks, these anxieties, these negative emotions, these triggers, you know, getting in your way, these traumas coming up every single day. Not saying that that's like what everyone is experiencing, but like you can understand how if you have these negative things going on in life, if you're angry all the time, if you've got like big life scary money stresses, you know, that's gonna get in your way of being able to stop and receive this information. Now, it doesn't mean you have to solve all your life problems. There's still ways to work around this. But what I'm trying to get at is like how it affects your psychic ability. And that's a big part of my course, is that we really have to understand how to help ourselves first before we can help other people. And to give you just like a more recent example for like me, myself, like even though I am doing psychic block removal techniques constantly, there are things that happen in my life too. I went through an extremely traumatic event about a year ago, and I tried to kind of just work my way through it for about like maybe a month on my own. But I noticed that like my normal techniques for handling things were not working, and I realized I needed more tools and I needed more help to deal with that trauma so that I could come to my readings and be the best reader possible. But it was affecting my sleep. It was affecting like my mental health. I was very much going in like circles and spiraling and not knowing how to get myself out of certain cognitive distortions, thought patterns, and I needed the tools to understand how to do that. Ultimately, it was affecting my anxiety, and I had to incorporate new shadow work, self-care, psychology techniques to be able to work with it, through it, and ultimately have it be less of a trigger every time that I thought about it, so that I could show up and be a cleaner and clearer vessel. Now, I'm still doing that work day to day, but because I took the active steps to deal with it, I was able to kind of move through it again, lessen it. It doesn't affect my readings as much as it did in the beginning. And the thing about what this looks like, it's going to look different for each of us. So me specifically, I signed up for therapy. That's something I'd never done before because I knew I needed tools beyond that. Does everyone need therapy for their little traumas and things? Maybe not. But that's what I needed at that time. If you're more curious about this, I am going to make a podcast. I'm kind of thinking about doing like quarterly or yearly podcasts on like my psychic journey, just like whatever I'm going through at the time. So check that out down below. So even if you aren't going to be using this for like psychic development, I think it's something that everyone should do all the time to work through whatever stresses in life that they have coming up. So even if you're not out there trying to study to be a psychic, let's talk about next, like what you can actually do. What are shadow work techniques? And with this, just remember that like any psychic block technique that you like come across through like me or my courses, or any sort of like psychology technique, like that's the same thing. Just because it's not called shadow work doesn't mean you can't use it. Shadow work is a very recent term. So just giving you a very rapid fire list here. We have talk therapy, we have journaling, we have meditating. I would throw in shamanic journeying as a way to do shadow work. I think getting quiet and just being introspective is enough sometimes. I think doing creative techniques as well can be very healing. It might not work for everyone, but playing music, doing art, even going to art therapy, doing automatic writing, automatic drawing, dancing, walking outside in nature. Truly, it's what works for you and what gets you into this state of being able to be reflective and go over the stuff that you've been ruminating on. You can sit down and talk to your guides. You can use tarot cards. You can use oracle cards or any other sort of like divination tool. You can also pick up self-help books. I think those are immensely helpful. Getting the education basically to understand what's going on, because sometimes we don't know the tools that we need. And so educating yourself via book, via internet, via looking at somebody else's YouTube channel and getting answers on how to work through something. There's so much education and like resources available at our fingertips that sometimes all you need to do is just learn a little bit more about it, and then you are like, oh, cool, got it. Side note, I'm gonna list some of like my favorite resources down in the description below because it's been such a theme, obviously, in every one of my readings, and because I talk to psychics, that I have kind of like a growing blog list of like my favorite stuff to look into, depending on like what you're going through: anxiety, depression, grief, loss, like whatever it is. So that is just some ways that you can do shadow work. And I think that's why it's so confusing, is there's really no one size fits all. Like going on a walk to somebody might not help at all, while it might help for this person over there. Or like going swimming or sitting next to a body of water might really help somebody, but it might not help somebody else. So it's really what works for you. And you have to remember, as you're doing these things, you're not just like doing it for the sake of doing it. You're setting the intention, or you're setting a goal to basically work through something. I just had a fight with my husband. I need to like work through these thoughts so that I can be more present. I just lost my family member, and I need to like journal about my grief and my thoughts so that I can like get this out. The goal should really be that you're doing it to work through some of the harder, triggering, more negative, even if it's small stuff, emotions, challenges that are going on. Now, there are more techniques that I list out in my courses, especially in my Psychic Development Masterclass. I believe I have like a printout, if I'm not mistaken. I think so. But the intent here is that you're using this to feel happier, feel less stress, feel more in alignment, and feel more guided. You could also be doing it to get unstuck, to help you with relationships that you're having, handle grief, heal through some trauma. It's always going to be dependent on you and what's going on in your life right now. And again, bringing this back to the psychic ability, if you have so many life stresses and things going on that you just can't even concentrate and receive psychic information, that's going to be a big block to your psychic ability. So again, even if it's like small, little tiny things or really, really big things, doing shadow work, doing self-care work, doing introspective psychoanalysis, whatever you want to call it work, it's such a necessary tool for dealing with your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. And even again, if you're not aiming to be a psychic to read other people, doing this will just make life a lot easier, I promise. So hopefully this has convinced you to do some shadow work, whether it be for your intuition, for just yourself, or to help others out. And hopefully you understand a little better about what it is. There's really no like one specific thing or one size fits all. As long as you kind of understand the intention behind it and the purpose of why you're doing it, really just find techniques and exercises that work best for you. So if you have something that is your go-to, feel free to share it down in the comments down below. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a big like. And if you have any questions for me about this, please leave it in the comments as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.